Hey guys, I want to make a video today, and if you guys are following along with my previous couple of videos here, I was talking about audio and sounds in Unity. In the last video, what we did is we set up a script here to be able to control the volume of each sound based on this slider from here. And one of the questions that starts to come up here is if a player sets this to a certain value, maybe they close out the app or they close out the game here, can we keep that value? Because it would be kind of annoying if the player sets it to 50 and then they close the game and then they go back and they play it again and it like blows out their speakers, goes back to 100%, right? That'd be kind of annoying for a player. So the question becomes here, how do I save this player setting or this player preference in within the game, all right? So the term moving forward here, we're going to say PlayerPrefs. We're going to set a player pref for the volume slider from here. And once you understand player prefs, it can be very powerful, but they can also be very limiting too here. So it's important to understand what you should do with player prefs and what you shouldn't do. So first off, what you shouldn't do. Player prefs is an insecure storage, so if you have anything like passwords or any sensitive information, this really shouldn't be stored with that. That being said, you also shouldn't have super complex data. Like if you have some crazy, I don't know, maybe like if you're doing some type of modeling, or you have some type of like 3D model you want to store with player prefs, that probably wouldn't be the best thing to do here. But what you can do here is very simple values. If you have something in the world here, or like a value or a favorite color of the player or a certain score, you could say that within the player prefs, and this way it persists every single time they launch the game here. All right, so let's talk about our scene here, our scripts, and what we got going on so far, and then we're going to build off from here. So what we got going on here, number one, in the project here, we have a script. This is our only script existing, the only script that we wrote existing in the project. We have an audio source. We have a slider, a volume slider. We have, when we start the script here, we get a reference to the audio source. We add an on listener so that when we adjust the volume here, it calls this method down here. And then finally, we have this update method here that I can play the sound with the spacebar or I can stop it. Now, of course, you could do it with a background track if you have some sort of, I don't know, background music. That will work too. I just like to be able to control it like this here. This way it's easier for me to talk with the music playing, and you guys can kind of hear my voice and the sounds too here, all right? In scene, we have the main camera, of course. We have an audio listener here. Remember, that's super important. Those are like your ears. If you don't have that on, you won't hear anything. We have, I'm going to save the scene here. We have a directional light because we're dealing with a 3D world. We have the game manager object that has the audio source and the script on here. We have the volume slider canvas. We have the volume slider itself. We don't have any on value change method because that's taken care of down here, and we'll set the listener up right there. And then finally, we have an event system that should be added by default with the canvas. So let's get working here. So the first thing I want to do here is every time I adjust the slider, remember this function is going to be called down here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set a value in the player prefs, and this way we can kind of get that value in a second here. But right now I just want to set it, and then we'll see if we run into any errors. So what we're going to do is we're going to say player prefs, and that should come up by default there, playerprefs.set float. And we're using a float here because with audio we're dealing with values between 0 and 1. If we go to our game manager, we can see that 1's the max and 0 is the minimum. We go back to here, and we need to give it a string because the way it's stored is like key value pairs here. So I'm going to say volume slider. Now, of course, you could have one for sound effects, one for dialogue, one for music. And then let's go ahead and set this equal to audio source.volume or the volume slider.volume. I'm going to say volume slider dot volume. Boom. Now, we're not going to see anything here, but what should happen here, if we didn't do anything wrong, we shouldn't see any errors right now. The way the script is set up here, this is being called, and if this is like coded wrong in some way, shape, or form, the console should let us know, all right? So it's good for a little mini test right now. Let's bring this off to the side. Let's go ahead and hit play. And let's see if we get any sort of crazy warning telling us that we're terrible, we're awful coders, and that we don't do anything right. It's a lot of warning messages look sometimes, right? And we're doing pretty good here. So there's no real warnings. There's no warnings, there's no errors. So it looks like we're in good shape here. So we're setting a value in the player prefs, but how do we get that value out? Well, it's pretty simple. On the start method from here, I'm going to do it, let's do it right here. We're going to say float volume, we should call it, let's call it test volume, just right now, equals player prefs, if I can type player prefs dot get float. So we're setting it down here, and now we want to get it, and we have to make sure these string values match up exactly. Copy that from there, paste that right there, and let's just go ahead and debug the test debug.log test volume just like that there, and this way we can see it in the game here, or in the console, I should say, not the game. Go ahead and save this back to the game. And if we turn it up, now we have that right there. Until I'll tell you what here. That was left over from last time. What we're going to do is we're going to set this as close as we can to 50. And I'm looking at this number right over there. So let's take it down to about there. And we're going to stop the game. And then we're going to start the game again. If it says 50 point, yep. So it looks like we're doing pretty good here. So we're able to set the volume in the PlayerPrefs. We can also get the value back here, all right? Now what we want to do is we want to adjust the slider this way it makes sense back to the user. We're giving some feedback to the user to where the volume's already at, right? So what we're going to do, let's go back to here. We're going to say we can get rid of this here. And instead of calling this test volume, let's just call this volume. We're going to say volume slider dot value equals volume. And I think that is correct from there. We can't do that value, blah, blah, blah. I'll just source that volume slider. I'm sorry, volume slider. So wondering why that wasn't working. And then even though the volume slider is being adjusted from here, we also want to make sure we set the audio source to there. Because remember, once we drag and drop that, we're changing that value, but we also want to make sure that we set the audio to here. In fact, I'll tell you what here, even though we have that listener, this might actually be adjusted. We might not need that second line of code. Let's test it out real quick. So again, let's keep an eye on the audio source, and let's see if it adjusts the audio source too. And boom, okay, cool. So we don't even need that slider from there. It adjusts it. It adjusts the audio slider, and it adjusts the audio itself too here, right? Boom, boom. Let's put it to 28's pretty good. Why not? Stop. And we should see it move graphically, and we should see the volume be adjusted too. And if we hit spacebar, right, up to 100, a little louder, stop, start, up to 100, right? Pretty cool. So this is really good so far, but there's one more little catch here, and this is if the PlayerPrefs isn't set. If they just got to the scene here, they never set PlayerPrefs before, well, we don't want it to default to 0 because then they wouldn't hear anything, right? We want it to default to, let's say, 75%. So we're looking pretty good here. What I want to do really quickly here is I'm going to say float volume. This is looking really good here. What I'm going to do here is we're going to say, from here, we're going to say if PlayerPrefs dot has key, and this is going to be called like a method, and we need to give it a key, and the key is the same string value that we have right here. So if this exists here, I want you to do all of this stuff from here. And of course, we could do the opposite too. If it doesn't exist, you know, in this case, it's not a ton of code, so it doesn't make a ton of difference here. Else, so if it exists here, go ahead and pull the volume slider value out of the PlayerPrefs. If it doesn't exist, what we're going to do is we're going to say float volume slider. Let's set this equal to 0.75f. Save. And let's drag this back over here. And you might be saying, hey, well, you know, how do I get rid of it? It's in PlayerPrefs right now. If I'm in the editor, of course, if it's on a mobile device, I could just uninstall it, but that seems a little cumbersome. If I'm in the editor, how do I get rid of these PlayerPrefs? I'm going to show you that in 1 second here. First off, to make sure this top part of the if statement's working. So if we code this correctly here, and if I didn't make any mistakes here, which is very possible because I make mistakes all the time, it should work just like before. So let's go ahead and hit play after it loads, of course, and hit play. Looking pretty good, 94. Let's drop that down to 52. Cool. And hit play again. Boom, and at 50. So the first part of the if statement's working. What we want to do now to get rid of the PlayerPrefs in my inspector, in the quote-unquote pseudo game here, I'm going to go up to edit, go down to clear all PlayerPrefs. So now this doesn't exist anymore. There is no PlayerPrefs for the volume slider. So it should do else from here. And we could even do a debug if we wanted to, but right now I don't think we need that. I think we just have to keep an eye on the volume and make sure that gets set to 75%. And we hit play. Boom, and 75 from there. All right. And the music is still working. All right. And keep in mind here that we're looking at the slider visually. and the audio source separately too. So we're confirming that the audio, even we can't really quantify the volume with our ear sometimes here, we can see it right here. All right. Hopefully that makes sense from here. So I think that's just about it here. Again, if you want to store some type of player settings, the PlayerPrefs is the terminology you're looking for, and it really has a lot of utility, a lot of value. When you start doing this with games, it takes it to the next level. It's kind of like when you take your games online. Like, yeah, game's cool online, but when you have a leaderboard, it makes it that much more cool. So from the top here, let's skip all this here because we talked about that before. That's for a different video. We're looking if the PlayerPrefs has key, volume slider. We're going to get that key out, and we're going to set it equal to volume. And of course, you could even make this a little more slick if you wanted to. That will work just as good from there. Cool. Else, otherwise, just set it equal to 75. And if you think that the players, and I like to think, what's the player likely to do more of? So my code's cleaner, and also just because of, I guess, logical flow. If they're more likely to get the else statement, and then less likely to touch the setting here, I might move that up to there, but that's just kind of being a little bit pedantic at that point. Usually it's more about having clean code. But anyways, on the update, of course, we talked about that before. We can play it or we can stop here, and then we're setting the volume on the volume slider, and we're also setting the player prefs in there too. All right, pretty cool. Save, and I think that's going to be it for this video. Guys, if you enjoyed, be sure to give me a thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe. And if you guys want to turn the notification bell, feel free to. That definitely helps me out a lot. And I will see you guys in the next video. And if you guys have any questions, comments, or want to make a video on anything, be sure to drop a comment down below. Or if you don't like me, or for whatever reason, just you want to tell me to have a good day, or you have I don't know, a favorite phrase you like to say, go ahead and drop in the comments down below. Appreciate you guys watching. I hope you guys have a fantastic day.